The South Dakota Stories, Volume 5. She used to dread the winter, the cold, driving in the snow, but that was before she started spending it in the right place. Now, wandering the snow puts a smile on her face, and breathing in the landscapes warms her spirit more than any coat. Because if South Dakota taught her anything, it's that it's never too cold to have too much fun. There's so much South Dakota, so little time.
Warning. The following podcast might be too truthful for most liberals. Listener discretion is therefore advised.
Welcome to the Tea Party Power Hour. This is your host, Mark Galar. We have a very interesting guest on the show today, Mr. John Cox. He's an attorney, a CPA, an investment advisor, a real estate manager investor. He was the Republican nominee for governor of California back in 2018. He is here today to talk to us about his brand new book, which just was released last week in time for tonight's Newsom's Ron DeSantis debate. It's called The Newsom Nightmare, the California Catastrophe, and How to Reform Our Broken System. Mr. Cox, welcome to the show.
Well, great to be with you, Mark. Appreciate it.
Yeah, well, I got to tell you, you are not someone who shies away from a challenge. You've run against Barack Obama in Illinois, and you've run against Gavin Newsom in California. I mean, that's someone who doesn't back down to a challenge, and the kind of person that may tilt at windmills. I'm excited to have you. Yeah, go ahead.
No, well, Wyoming doesn't need me. Wyoming's pretty well managed, but Illinois and California need a lot of help. And I'm a big golfer, and I always say anybody can make par from a fairway. It takes a special kind of golfer to make it from the rough. So that's what I do. I take on challenges.
Well, you certainly do, and it reminds me of what Gavin Newsom's auntie Nancy said with regard to AOC, and that was that there are places where a half-empty glass of water with a D behind its name could be elected to office. So very, very, very true. But I think it's interesting she doesn't include herself in that, because that's pretty much true of her district. Well, let's talk about the man himself, Gavin Newsom. You wrote so much in your book about his hard-scrabble childhood, how he had to, how he had to pull himself up by his own bootstraps. So sad. His neighbors, the Gettys at the trailer park, how they helped each other.
Yes.
Anyway, so I'm going to let you tell us a little bit.
Excuse me while I get my handkerchief out. I want to make sure that I want to soak up all the tears here. Well, no, listen. I mean, and Mr. Newsom, when he ran for office, made the big point about how he grew up with a single parent. His mom divorced his father. So he did technically have that, but it wasn't like his father went away or anything like that. Just to give you a little frame of reference, Gavin Newsom comes from a long line of power brokers in California. His grandfather, William Newsom the First, was the power broker behind getting Jerry Brown's father, Pat Brown, elected governor of California back in the 50s. And of course, his reward for that was Squaw Valley, which is the ski area in Lake Tahoe that the state owned and turned over to the Newsoms to make a lot of money on. Newsom's father, William Newsom II, was a major factor in Jerry Brown getting elected governor of California. And of course, he was rewarded with a judgeship. And then, of course, later on, William Newsom, Gavin's father, became the trustee for J. Paul Getty's trust. And, people today don't remember much about the Gettys, but J. Paul Getty was the first billionaire in the world, basically. And this is when $1 billion really counted for something. This is back in the 60s. Now we have a lot of billionaires, but back in the 60s, there were none, and J. Paul Getty was the definition of a very wealthy oil man. And Gavin Newsom basically grew up as Gordon Getty's son. Gordon Getty was the son of J. Paul Getty and succeeded to his fortune when his father died. And William Newsom, Gavin Newsom's father, really shepherded all that along. So Gavin Newsom comes from a long line of wealthy benefactors and power brokers, basically, in California. So not exactly a hard scrabble.
Oh, okay. Well, apparently I got that part wrong. Reading comprehension was never one of my strong points. Now, you mentioned in the book, and I know I'm going a bit off tangent here, but or a bit off on a tangent. You mentioned in the book this PR stunt you pulled that I thought was hilarious, where you put cardboard cutouts of members of the California House of Representatives, I believe. Did you do the senators too, or just the House?
Yes.
Okay.
No, I did both. 120 cardboard cutouts, and I still have them. And we pasted stickers on their suits, like NASCAR drivers,
right.
To demonstrate. I actually stole the idea from Bill Maher, so I can't claim complete credit for it, but it was done to illustrate an important point, Mark, and that is our politicians are for sale to the highest bidder, just like NASCAR. And, that really is what the book is about. The book is about how Gavin Newsom and the California legislature has basically sold policy in California to these interest groups. And that's why we have a California catastrophe. That's why we have a housing shortage. That's why we have an energy shortage. That's why we have a water shortage. That's why our education system spends $100 billion a year and is one of the worst in the nation. That's why we live with higher crime and wildfires threatening us all the time. That's why our taxes, Mark, are the highest in the country. That's why our government spending and our regulations are the highest in the country. These are all elements of the California catastrophe, and they're the direct result of Gavin Newsom having basically held an auction and selling off policy in California to these interest groups. And that's what really I detail in the book to a great extent.
So Gavin Newsom, when he eventually runs for president, and we all know is going to offer to do to the United States what he's done for California?
Yeah. Yes, he's going to sell off Washington, D.C. I will say the parts that already haven't been sold off. I mean, the U.S. Congress is basically for sale, just like the California legislature. I mean, look at what goes on. Congress, there's some good people there, but let's face it, you have to raise so much money to get a congressional seat. And then to keep it, you have to even raise more money, because if you don't raise enough, interest group is going to come in and spend a lot of money to defeat you. And you've got to be worried about that. So I think this money chase is certainly evident in Washington, D.C., just like it is in California. But I want to point out, Mark, that my book, instead of just pointing out this problem, I actually have a solution in there that I hope we'll get a chance to talk about.
We will. Hear the people. I've booked a lot of time for that. That's very important. And
it is.
Yeah, and we're going to get to that. But I'd also like to kind of go back into Newsom for a while. And you mentioned crime as one of the things that's going wrong in California. And you specifically mentioned Prop 47 in the book. That was co-written by a guy named George Gascon. And he's the DA in Los Angeles County. Is that correct?
Yes, he was the DA in San Francisco, by the way. He didn't have enough fun destroying San Francisco, so he apparently moved down to L.A. and has decided to destroy L.A. as well. Both of these, by the way, his campaigns were funded by George Soros, who is this billionaire who, for one reason or another, believes it's his mission in life to make it so that it's very difficult to prosecute criminals. I don't get it. I think just common sense that if you don't punish crime, you're going to get more of it. Call me crazy, but I think that is probably pretty much common sense.
Right.
And George Soros, for whatever reason, has tried to elect all these district attorneys around the country. There was one in Chicago, Philadelphia, New York, and here we are, San Francisco and Los Angeles. And their mission is basically to say, like Prop 47 said, you can go in and you can shoplift up to $950, just
right.
under $1,000, and we're just going to give you a traffic ticket, which basically means, by the way, that the police don't do a thing about it because, frankly, what's the point of giving somebody a traffic ticket? I mean, and that's what's happened. And if you're a retailer in California, a lot of them have just either hired private security themselves. Of course, that's a cost that ends up in the cost of their product, which is certainly one of the things driving California's cost of living. But they also, some of them just close up shop, like Walgreens just closed up a bunch of stores in San Francisco, and Nordstrom's did the same. So yeah, it's just nonsensical, and it doesn't surprise anybody who understands California.
Well, I can tell you this. I had heard something about the fact that you could shoplift in California with impunity, but I didn't really know it was called Prop 47. I didn't know George Gascon's involvement in that. But last night I had a eureka moment. I've decided I'm going to do all my Christmas shopping in LA County, or maybe I should call it my Christmas shoplifting. I mean, I could just see walking into a Louis Vuitton store and the person saying, "Can I help you?" And I said, "Oh, I'm just here to shoplift a purse for my wife for Christmas. Could you point me to the shelf that has everything under $950?" Or you go to a Macy's and may I help you, sir? Well, yeah, I'd like to shoplift some polo shirts. Well, can I do anything to help? Well, yeah, listen, if you could keep a running total and stop me before I get to $950, yes, sir. In all honesty, it wouldn't surprise me if Gavin Newsom wouldn't mandate that retail stores in California are going to have to start having shoplifting courtesy booths where you check out just like you normally would, but they make sure you don't go over $950. I mean, this is crazier than hell. And then, like you said,
it is.
Yeah.
But it's that way, Mark, with a lot of policies. I mean, California hasn't built a new reservoir to hold water for 50 years, even though the state has gone from 19 million people to 40 million. I mean, that's nonsensical, too. Gavin Newsom has banned the sale of gas-powered cars. He wants everybody to drive electric cars in California, yet last August and the August before and the August before that, he told us not to run our air conditioners in August when it's kind of warm because we didn't have enough electricity. Now, right now, only about 10% of the cars are electric. So he wants us to be 100% electric, yet we don't have enough electricity to even power air conditioning today in August. That's nonsensical. So there's a lot of things in this state that are nonsensical, and that's, again, another reason Gavin Newsom should not be the president of the United States.
Absolutely. Now, I don't mean to stick on this crime thing, but I want to make sure I understand this. If I'm in LA County, I can walk into a store, steal a little under $950 worth of stuff. If I get caught, and that's a big if, because I don't think the employees at the retailers care anymore, I'm going to be given a ticket that is a misdemeanor. And in LA County, Mr. George Gascon doesn't prosecute misdemeanors. So basically, I can walk into any store I want, and as long as I don't go over $950, nothing is going to happen to me.
It's worse than that, Mark.
Worse?
It's worse than that because Gascon also announced that resisting arrest is not going to be prosecuted. So if a police officer comes in and says, "No, you cannot do that, Mr. Burglar," or you can't steal that purse, and if you resist him, you punch him in the face, or you do whatever you want to that police officer, Mr. Gascon is not going to prosecute that. That was actually in a pronouncement. I couldn't believe it myself, but it's like, who would want to be a police officer in LA County? I can't imagine anybody would.
Yeah. New York and LA.
It's ass backwards. It's just incredible, and it's all politics. It's all designed to get votes from a certain constituency that doesn't like the police and doesn't like being told they can't steal. And it's at variance with the general population who likes to have safety. But, listen, the fact is that a lot of the general population, Mark, doesn't pay attention to politics anymore.
Right.
They feel like they're out of it. They feel like, oh, gee, that's just a bunch of rich people fighting, and I don't want any part of it. I'm not going to get involved in politics. And guess what? If you don't pay attention, it's like the old card game. If you can't figure out who the mark is, it's probably you. And that's the case here. If you don't pay attention, if voters continue to sit out these wars, and that's what my reform is all about.
Let's get into that. You said that when you look at the number of people that each, and I think we were talking the federal government, but the number of people that each representative represents, it's huge, and there's no way that they can be in touch with their voters back home. And so you came up with this thing called Hear the People, which is kind of based on something you discovered in New Hampshire. Tell my listeners about Hear the People, and we're going to give out the website. And even when people listen to this over their favorite podcast player, we're going to have a link in there so that they can go to Hear the People. But go ahead, talk to us about the problem, and then talk to us about how Hear the People solves it.
If you took a look at our political system, Mark, from 30,000 feet, you'd say to yourself, it's the dumbest, most corrupt system imaginable. And why? Because people who want something from government, these funders, these special interest groups, fund the campaigns of the people who make the decisions. Think about that for a second. I mean, it's legalized bribery, basically. And why? You pointed out, a congressional district, we have 435 now. That number was locked in place in the early 20th century by Congress itself. So now with 435 congressmen and 330 million people, each congressional district is about 750,000 people. That's a huge number.
Oh, yeah.
And you need a large amount of money to reach that many people with advertising. Let's face it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the proposal I have, which is modeled on New Hampshire, basically subdivides that huge district into 100 sub-districts. So each district is 7,500 people. So you have 100 districts of 7,500. And each of those little tiny districts elects a local representative. And those 100 people then get together after the election and have a vote and decide to send one person to Washington, D.C. The other 99 representatives of those little tiny districts, those other 99 stay home. They go about their personal lives like they were before. And the one goes to Washington, D.C. The bottom line here, Mark, is that none of these 100 needs any money at all to win a district of only 7,500 people. They would look stupid spending money on TV or social media or radio or, sad to say, podcasts.
Ouch.
Ouch. Yeah, they would get elected by going door to door or meeting their constituents at town hall meetings or at church or at school or wherever they would meet people. And they would get elected based on their competence and their character, not on how much money they're able to squeeze out of high rollers. Isn't that the way our democracy ought to work?
I think our founding fathers would very much approve.
Yes, they wanted Congress to be the people's body. They wanted Congress to be farmers and business people that were known and respected in the community. That was what the Congress was supposed to be. And people were supposed to go to Congress, act as a representative of those people, knowing their district, and serve a couple or a few terms and then go back home, right?
Right. Yeah, that was
They
it.
weren't supposed to be careerists. They weren't supposed to be careerists.
No.
This structure, Mark, I think is revolutionary. It'll return Congress to being the people's Congress. And by the way, it's bipartisan. It doesn't favor either side, theoretically. It doesn't. Now I'm a conservative, so I think my ideas are better than liberals.
Mm-hmm.
But liberals are going to be free to get elected and talk about their ideas. And so it'll be an exchange of ideas in each little district. And I think that's the way our politics ought to be done.
Right. And I personally think that our elected representatives need to spend a lot less time in Washington and a lot more time in their home districts. Even with this plan, I'd like to see them stay home, do Zoom meetings, and that way when there's a big vote coming up, the people will have access to their representative because you don't have to take a flight to Washington. You could just go to their local office, and that would be fantastic. So here's the tricky question, Mr. Cox. How does this get implemented?
That's the beauty.
Go ahead.
That's the beauty of it, because the U.S. Constitution in Article 1 doesn't say anything about how Congress is elected. All it says is that the states have the ability to determine the time, manner, and place of how Congress is elected. So the beauty of this is that each state can enact this. So Texas, where you are, their legislature can decide this is a great way of electing our Congress. And I think when we get a few states that do it, other states will look at it and say, wow, that makes a lot of sense. And they'll jump on the bandwagon. So I believe that this can be a movement that just starts in the states and goes all across the nation. I think Democrats and Republicans will love this plan once they get to know it. The people who won't like it are the lobbyists and the TV networks and, the big media corporations. They won't like it because they make billions of dollars a year from all these political ads that get run.
Right.
But the people know that we're not being served well by politicians who are just professional fundraisers. We need to get political leaders who actually respond to the people. And and what I said, Mark, before about when the people know that they can talk to their little local representative, they will get more involved. So that whole discussion we had earlier about how people are uninvolved in politics today, I think under this plan, people will want to get more involved because they feel they can.
Yeah, it sounds like a great plan. I was very intrigued by it. I didn't know that New Hampshire had something similar to this going on. And I've always felt like my representative doesn't really represent me for the most part. I mean, who doesn't feel that way? Didn't you say in the book that the current approval rate for Congress was something like 7%? It's even less than the mainstream news.
Yeah, they're ranked right below colonoscopies and cholera, So, they're not very well respected. But it's interesting. People like their local congressman, and maybe that's because they feel like he's their guy, like their football team or something. But
right.
but generally speaking, Congress doesn't get good ratings, and why? I think because people know that they're basically bought and paid for by these interest groups,
sure.
and and they don't get a lot done. I mean, that's why we have this huge debt and deficit, and we have an open border, and we have all these other things that just haven't been solved because these guys just listen to the funders.
I have to ask. I know you've shared this idea with people on both sides of the political aisle. Are you finding people on one side of the political aisle more receptive than the other at this point?
No, I think it's really bipartisan, but we've been talking to mainly former congressmen. They like the idea. Current congressmen are going to take a little while. They're going to take a little while to warm up to it because let's face it, they're in office because they have learned how to function in the current system and raise a lot of money and and they're not going to be eager to have it changed. But I think ultimately the people will have their voice in this, and maybe my book will start this forest fire. I'm hoping that that'll happen.
Yeah, it certainly has the potential to do that. We just need to make sure enough people know about it. Now, you mentioned in the book, and this is something that I have to admit that I'm very jealous of you for. You actually debated Barack Obama. That is like a fantasy of mine. I would love to debate that guy, despite the fact that he's very good. And didn't you debate him at the University of Chicago?
Well, actually, it was Chicago State University.
Oh, okay.
But yeah. It was actually one of the first internet debates. This is back in 2003, 20 years ago. Hard to believe.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was running the Republican primary for the U.S. Senate. He was in the Democratic primary for the U.S. Senate. And he and I have to say, are both interested in policy. And we had 3 debates together. On one, we debated healthcare and education for an hour and a half. Basically, just he and I debated. And it was kind of interesting because I said, I think the free market and competition and patient choice is going to result in lower cost and more availability of education and healthcare. His answer was that basically people are too stupid to do these things on their own, that my answer was social Darwinism, that in his view, people need government to shepherd them through education and healthcare. And I think that sums up the difference between the two parties, frankly. And that would be a great national debate to have. I mean, the Obama wing would say that government has to be there to hold our hand every step of the way. My answer would be that I think people will rise to the occasion and can make their own decisions to do these things in a free and open market. So, that's a good debate to have.
What a novel idea.
Yeah.
Freedom of the people.
Well, no.
Yeah.
Freedom of the people.
Well, Obama, again, is a very polished debater, but the facts are rarely on his side. And I think he's a guy who kind of charmed his way into the White House more so than having great ideas and great policy ideas that needed to be implemented. But at any rate, I'm sure that's an experience that you'll never forget. I didn't realize you had debated him 3 times.
Well, he's a very smooth and charming individual. I have to say that. The thing on him in the Illinois House and Senate where he was, I think he was in the Senate maybe. But he played poker and played golf most of the time there. So he got to know the legislators really well and knows how to charm people. And I have to say, he's a very charming individual. There's no question about that.
Sure. Yeah. And I have to be honest, even though I wasn't very fond of him when he was in office because of his policies, given the bozo we have now, wow. I just,
very different.
I really don't even know where to begin, but it does show us that the left is willing to vote for anyone with a D behind their name. I mean, they really just don't care. It's amazing to me how little they care about, what are those things called? Oh yeah, facts. And it's just sad. And the other thing you said that really struck home is that so many people are disconnected from politics. I had someone, a couple of weeks ago, I'm not name dropping, but a couple of weeks ago, I interviewed Ted Cruz. And somebody that knew me came up to me and said, "Oh yeah, I listened to your interview with that guy from Texas." And I said, "The interview, are you talking about Ted Cruz?" And they said, "Yeah, I think that's what his name was." And I just kind of went, how in the heck can anyone live in Texas and listen to an interview and then forget that Ted Cruz was the subject of the interview. I mean, that's how bad it is. People don't even know who their own representatives are. They don't care. And
No, and that's what we need to do. We need to rekindle people's interest. And I think you do that by making the campaigns smaller and not based on mass media. And that's my mission.
well, it's a good mission to have, and I think in order to understand it, people are going to need to get a copy of the book. The title of the book
Yep.
is The Newsom Nightmare, the California Catastrophe, and How to Reform Our Broken System. I assume it's available wherever good books are sold.
On Amazon, and it's owned by a 501c3 I started to deliver political education. And that 501c3 is the sponsor of hearthepeople.org.
Nice.
So people can go to hearthepeople.org. So I'm not making any money on this. This is my contribution to try to help this wonderful country that's really given me incredible benefits. I have a wonderful business, a wonderful family, and I want this country to be better than when I found it, and that's my goal.
And it's a wonderful goal to have. One last question before we let you go. Tonight's the big debate night. We're gonna
Yep.
we're gonna get this show out in about an hour so
Yeah.
that people can hear it. Maybe give some
Yeah.
ideas. What are you anticipating as far as the debate between DeSantis and Newsom, which is a really weird debate because Newsom isn't officially in the ring?
Yeah, he's running. By the way, he's running. If it's not this year, it's 2028.
Right.
But Newsom is going to do what he always does. He's going to talk about abortion, guns, and climate change.
Okay.
And that's why the media loves him. I mean, those are the big issues for the media. By the way, those are the big issues for Democratic voters in the primary states that elect, the president. So he's no dummy. I mean, I never said he was a dummy.
Right.
So he's going to talk about those things. DeSantis is going to respond to that and talk about, the tax, burden in Florida and the business and openness and COVID. And they're going to throw a bunch of facts on COVID back and forth. But the fact is, Gavin Newsom shut down the state. My kid couldn't go to college. He shut down churches. By the way, he shut down churches, and the courts made him pay millions in legal fees to churches who sued the state for that. So, he lost in court on that thing. And DeSantis is going to talk about freedom and opportunity and free markets. And I think it's actually going to be a wonderful learning experience for people who tune in. I'm going to watch it, and I'm hoping that a lot of people will, because we need to have this debate.
Absolutely. And I think you might very well find these two guys running against each other in 2028. Yep. So it's very relevant, to say the least. Again, I just think it's kind of unusual that he's having a debate and he hasn't officially thrown his hat in the ring. Well, Mr. Cox, thank you so much for being here. I think Hear the People is a wonderful idea. I'm on board. I'll run in my area for one of those mini territories.
You will.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. So we'll keep our fingers crossed on that one. And I'd love to have you back at some point to let us know how it's going, what progress we're making on this. So we'll do it. I'll get with your publicist and we'll have you back in a while and we'll talk about progress being made with Hear the People. But for now, I just want to say thank you for being on. You've been an absolute joy to interview, and we look forward to having you back sometime.
Thank you, Mark. Really appreciate it. God bless.
Thank you, Mr. Cox. Have a good day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
You've been listening to the Tea Party Power Hour with Mark Gillar.
Judy was boring.
Hello.
Then Judy discovered ChumbaCasino.com.
It's my little escape.
Now Judy's the life of the party.
Oh, baby, mama's bringing home the bacon.
Whoa, take it easy, Judy. The Chumba life is for everybody. So go to ChumbaCasino.com and play over 100 casino-style games. Join today and play for free for your chance to redeem some serious prizes. ChumbaCasino.com. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18 plus terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
Hello, it is Ryan, and I was on a flight the other day playing one of my favorite social spin slot games on ChumbaCasino.com. I looked over at the person sitting next to me, and you know what they were doing? They were also playing Chumba Casino. Coincidence? I think not. Everybody's loving having fun with it. Chumba Casino is home to hundreds of casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere, even at 30,000 feet. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com to claim your free welcome bonus. That's ChumbaCasino.com and live the Chumba life.
No purchase necessary. VGW. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18 plus.